So still talk is a work in progress. So there's going to be a lot of historical gaps and things that I also omit on purpose. I'm focused on a very particular period of Argentine tango. I'm not really interested on the beginnings of Argentine tango. I will try to give you sort of like a fast overview of that, just simply to understand a little bit what led us to the part that interests me, which is the golden age of tango, the 1940s and a little bit of the early 50s, and how from there we got to what we are doing today. There's also going to be a few things about Argentine history. That's also very pinpointed like this, not very complete, only to understand in comparison what was going on with the society in Argentina while the things that were happening in tango were happening. Here we can name a few dancers that are important, like Ovidio José Bianquet de Cachafaz, which is a very, very famous dancer. I don't know if you have heard of him. He was in numerous movies later during the late 30s and 40s. But is a person that, having been born in 1885 and having died in 1942, lived a big chunk of the history of tango, and it's a very, very important character, one of the creators of this dance. Then we can name also Casimiro Aín, El Vasco, the Basque was his nickname, because of another important thing he did in 1924, which is taking tango in front of the Pope, Pio XI. Why this happened? Because Casimiro Aín started to travel to Europe just for the fun of it, actually. He started dancing tango over there to make a living. He learned in Europe that basically the Pope doesn't think very high about tango, and doesn't think it's good for society to dance tango, that is a dirty dance. So basically what he does is go and meet a secretary of the Vatican that was Argentinian, a woman that had never danced tango before, and teach her a very clean, safe version of Argentine tango to dance it in front of the Pope, and to get the Pope to say, oh, okay, this is a good dance, and it's okay to dance tango. So I think that's a very important point from that era. And I place there El Negro Navarro, which is the teacher of Carlos Esteves, the teacher of my father, because without being well known like Casimiro Aín and El Cachafaz, he was part of the dancers of that time, more in the social circles. The way that Carlos Esteves started dancing in 1926 actually caused him to be sort of expelled from his family because the family didn't think it was a good thing for him to dance tango. And that's how people in the 20s thought about tango. The families didn't think tango was the greatest thing. So because he would go to hang out with the tango dancers, with what we will call the real milongueros, his family basically forget him, actually. I was very fortunate to meet Carlos Petrolio. So during the 30s, the dance keeps evolving, and some choreographic forms start entering, the famous figures that people were creating, mostly men again, and that were created by what they were seeing in the streets. Like for instance, you had from those times a walk that was a little bit like this, and they used to call it the walk from the guy that carries the bags, La Corrida del Bolsero, because they were watching people in the port carrying big bags in a plank going to the boat, so they were going like this, carrying the bags, and they take a step from that and they create a step. So all of these choreographic forms came from this sort of popular creativity and watching everyday people doing things. So tango was very simple, very pure, in its form, but although it was choreographic, not very much highly improvisational form. There were figures, they knew how to begin, how to end. There were known figures among the dancers that they could perform together.
Entonces, venía de acá, hacían esto y hacían esto. De ahí, acordaban acá, la mujer entraba así, un cruce, y hacía esto. Ok. De ahí, muchas veces esto y se
¿Y de qué año? ¿Qué año?
y eso es 18. Y acá, y acá, y acá.
Llega ahora la corrida de bolsero.
Y después la pierna entraba derecha, así cruce, y de ahí giraba para el cabello otro lado. Están haciendo esto. Están haciendo esto. Y entraba así, cruce hacia así, y la tenía o acá, o encima.
So then we're watching stuff from the late 10s and 20s. So with the posture with the hand up, face to face, watching the same direction, and the pelvis a little bit back to give a space for the feet. Why that? Because the dance wasn't very organized. So then they needed that space for the feet to do the stuff that was not really well ensemble with the two dancers. So we're talking about Carlos Esteves Petrolio, who started dancing in 1926. So he saw a lot of the dancing and a lot of this older dance that we talked about before. He was perfectly able to do it. But he perceived something in the music, a huge change of the music that started way before in the 20s, done by a man called Julio De Gato. I'm not entering too much into music history because otherwise we're going to be here for months. But he made a huge change on the music, creating a form of playing that was more melodical, not so staccato, not so rhythmical, starting what in the tango music is called the new guard of tango musicians, him and other ones. Now the dancers were always behind. They would still dance the style of the 30s that was more suitable to this type of staccato old music. So Petrolio noticed this change in the dance that needs to be happening in order to fit the music that was more popular in those days. And in a práctica in the Club Nelson, which is in the neighborhood of Devoto, right there, yeah, it's a map of Buenos Aires, right there in Villa Devoto, right? They started to practice there. That was one of the most important practicas. He led a big group of dancers who introduced lots of the movements we still do today. They started to do enrosques, planeos, ganchos, all turns that you could think about, all the combinations of turns with sacadas that you could think about, even back sacadas. All of that was stuff from the 40s. This is not new stuff. We're talking about a very complex type of movement. Again, maybe back then it was not done with the skill it can be performed today, but it existed and it was created by these people and a lot of other people that was practicing with them. Something you have to consider also is the fact that tango dancers were always very jealous of their own stuff. So they would practice among friends, they will pass things and ideas among friends, and people from other neighborhoods will come and pick and take to their own neighborhood, to their own practicas, whatever they saw. So then it begins the multiple versions of the same movement or the same idea and the different styles in each neighborhood, right? Another important neighborhood for Argentine tango is Villa Urquiza. I'm going to talk about that later, but I want you to see the proximity between Villa Urquiza and Devoto. Just keep that in mind. So easily a lot of the dancers from Villa Urquiza had come to Devoto to dance as well as people from Devoto going to Villa and other neighborhoods. We're talking about a very big city. So this is people that danced through this period. My father and my mother started a bit later. My father started in 1948 with age 12. He was very fortunate to be able to be part of the group that was practicing in Villa Devoto because he lived in this neighborhood, Monte Castro. So it was very easy for him to get there, right? So he was part of this group. Actually, he was spotted at a practica by this other character I talked to you about before, El Negro Lavandina. So he saw my father trying to learn in another practica, and he saw that he had talent, and he said, if you really want to learn and you really want to hang out with the real McCoys, come to Devoto to such and such practica. And that's how he sort of took him by the hand into all these great dancers of the time. Entering into the part of the talk I called the difficult years of Argentine tango, right? So with this political scene and a military government on top, big places started to close. The places to hold 200, 300 people, and orchestras started to close. Orchestras moved more into small venues to play, into confiterias and small bars to play. There's not so much room for dancing anymore. Also, we have to talk about another reality, which is in 1955, the milongueros from before were not that young anymore. They started to enter in their adulthood. They were around their mid-30s, late 30s, right? They started to get married. They started to have kids. The social meeting of tango was not that fun anymore for them. Also, the military government started to close down the big meetings of people. We're talking about getting to points where to have a party at your house, you had to give to the local police a list of the names of people that were going to be at your house. You had a limit of the number of people you could have in your house, right? So then we're talking about a political time that didn't allow for huge meetings of people for practicas of tango in the afternoon. So the death of these things, the death of tango, which to me is not a death, it's not a disappearance, it's a mutation, because it changed its form, right? So what happened in the 1960s, around the 60s, is, as I put here, dancing in the confiterias, the small bars and places. Tango starts fading at the beginning of petitero style. What is petitero style? Does anyone know what that is? Petitero style is what we know today as milonguero style. Okay? I'm going to get to that also later. But in 1960s, there is a style of tango that begins in a cafe called the Petit Cafe, right? Petit Cafe, where there was a lot of swing, recorded music for people to dance when they moved the tables apart late at night, very small dance floor, and maybe just to say that tango was not gone forever, they played 2, 3, 4 tangos a night. Now these people who were dancing far apart, was their opportunity to dance close. So it begins the woman with the face on the other side, the hand up, back to the pelvis back, and rebound, ocho cortado, rebound, ocho cortado, back ocho without pivot, rebound, ocho cortado style. Why? Small places, dancing close, people that had not lived the golden age of tango so much that had lost that culture because they were fed also from all the foreign music that was brought and actually promoted by the government as well, because they didn't want people so much to be embraced, to be close, to have a place to meet. So it begins that. So petitero style was the origins of what we call today milonguero style. Actually a term that was coined in the 1992-93. When I get there I tell you how and when and why, right? But until the time, it was not known as anything else. Petitero, because it was these people who went to the petit café and also dressed in a certain way. Some milongueros, when we talked about milongueros in the real term of the word milonguero, the guy who goes to the milonga, from the 40s and 50s, used to call them also the electricals, because compared to the long step, smooth dancing from before, they considered them electricals. Rebounding and very simple rhythmical stuff on place instead of big displacements on the floor. Right? So, moving on.